It would be an understatement if I said that in this tutorial we're going to learn how to add old paper texture to your images like so. I gotta tell you something up front. This will not only apply to paper but also any non-reflecting, non-transparent and non-illuminating material that exists on the face of planet Earth and beyond. Be it paper, be it bricks, be it walls, be it metal plates, you name it. Considering the fact that all of us have different needs and some of us are more ambitious than the others, I have divided this tutorial into 3 firm sections. In the first section, I'm going to show you how I exactly achieved this, and that's it. If that's what you're looking for, stick to it. Just watch that section. By the way, you know where this method came from? Nowhere. I figured by playing and experimenting with Photoshop, and I want you guys to do the same. Therefore, in the second section of this tutorial, I'm going to show you my exact game plan and strategy on how I achieved this. You see, Photoshop is not about learning tricks on how to do this, how to do that, how to do whatever. I don't want you guys to be that person who limits himself or herself to know 1,000 things about how to do this in Photoshop. I want you guys to expand. You see, Photoshop is about learning the fundamental concepts so that whatever idea that you have in your mind, you're able to show that, you're able to present that visually using your own methods, and that's what exactly we're going to talk about in the second section. By the way, I have not yet shown the final after image yet, so therefore in the third section we're going to take things to a whole new level and we're going to do something which some of you are either scared of or never heard of, and it is 3D. You heard it right, it is 3D and it will be a lot of fun. And if you guys are still living in the old days of Photoshop 6, good morning! Photoshop has 3D now. So without any further ado, let's get started. Welcome to Photoshop CC 2017. No matter what the version you're using, this is applicable to most of the latest versions. So let's get into it. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to open the background texture photo. So this is a stock photo of an old paper. And the first thing that I noticed right off the bat is that I hate this corner. Look at this corner. I hate the white thing and I want to remove it. We want to remove it by using the content aware fill. Let's just give it a shot. You know, the content aware fill sometimes work wonders, sometimes works madness. But let's give it a try. Alright, so let's select the rectangular marquee tool or whatever selection tool you select and select this area that you would like to remove and go to Edit, Fill, make sure Content Aware is checked, click OK. Boom! It has done a really magical job, you know, but sometimes it does do madness. So if it does not work, use the patch tool or the clone stamp tool. Alright, the next thing that we need to do is to open the image that we want to superimpose above this texture. Now, think of it like this. Think of painting on an original paper or printing on an original paper. Now, when you paint on a paper, at the very end, what do we have at the very end? The paper itself. And above that, we have the paints. So this background layer will be in the bottom and above that we'll have the image. So let's import the image, and to do that I'm using a plugin called PiXimperfect. So you can directly import it from your computer, but this plugin allows you to search for free stock photos inside of Photoshop. If you want to check the plugin out, go ahead and check it out right here in this video. Alright, so this is absolutely free, guys. I'm not advertising or something. This is totally free. So I'm gonna choose, you can search for any images from typing here, and I'm gonna choose this one. So just click on it and it will just import the image as a layer just above the background layer. It has finally imported the image, and now as you can see, this is on the layer above this. Now when you paint on a paper, let's just turn this off for a second. When you paint on a paper, especially if it's a bright paper, you paint on it with dark colors. You usually don't paint white on it, especially similarly when you print it. Your printer does not print white colors. If it's a white paper, it does not do that. It just doesn't print on the areas which are white. Okay? So, to delete areas that are 100% white, what is the blend mode that we use? Multiply. We discussed that in our blend mode in-depth tutorial. Alright, so if you have not watched yet, check it out right here. Let's turn on this layer and change the blend mode to multiply. Watch, right off the bat we have got a brilliant result, but this is not enough. Now as you can see, the sky is also being painted, and some of the brighter areas are also darkening the areas in this paper. So we would like to remove those areas from the layer. to remove bright areas and just bright areas, what do we use? We use blend if. So let's turn on this layer and right click on it and go to blending options. Now, we want to remove the bright areas of which layer? Of the current layer, right? We want to remove the bright areas from this current layer so that we can see through the bright areas and we can see the areas in the background layer. So, what slider would you pull? You would pull the slider of this layer, not the underlying layer, from the right. You see, on the right hand side we have bright and left hand side we have dark. So, we want to reveal the bright areas. So, we would pull the slider from the right. Watch. As you can see, the bright areas are becoming more and more see-through. Now, pull it to an extent that you want. And now as you can see, the selection is very harsh. You would have to press Alt or Option and click on this slider. This divides the slider into two and drag it a little bit to the left to make the transition a little smoother. Maybe a little bit to the right. There you go. There you go. I think this is good. Okay, amazing. As you can see, this is already beginning to give a very nice result. Click OK, and if you're satisfied with this, just stop. You don't have to do anything else, but we like to take things further. Now, as you can see, you might want to change the color of this because when you paint on it, you might want to paint on it with a blue color, maybe a brown color, maybe a red color, whatever you want. So, to change the color, add a hue saturation layer. And it's usually monochromatic, okay? If you want to retain the color, don't do this step, but since this is an old paper and in those times we didn't have modern printers, inkjet or laser printers that could print color, we will just monochromatize it, if that's a word. Alright, so let's create a new adjustment layer and hue saturation adjustment layer. And now make sure you check the colorize option. We want the hue saturation layer to be applied to just this image, not on the background, as you can see what's actually happened. So you would like to press Alt or Option and click on this line between these two layers. Now this is applying just to this image. Now play with the hue since it matches with the background. In this case, I would like to make it a little more yellowish. There you go. Increase the saturation if you want. There you go. Okay, lightness, you want to make it dark, you want to make it bright, but original 0 is fine. Oops, 0. Now it's time for us to make it a little dark and grungy. As you can already see that we are losing some details here in the border. So what we would like to do, we would like to go back to the blend if, so click on this and let's try dragging the slider a little bit towards the right since we get this details. Alright, so we're getting the details right now. There you go. Okay. This seems perfect, click OK. Now to increase the grunginess, make a copy of the background layer and place the background layer on top of every other layer. Now, you want to increase the grunginess? Change the blend mode of this one, to multiply. This is too much and we just wanted to apply the grunginess in the dark areas of the image, not the bright areas. So what we would do, go to the blend if again. So right click on it, go to blending options and drag the slider from the right. Of which one? Of this layer, of the underlying layer. We want to remove the effect from the brighter areas of the current layer, not the underlying layer this time. So of this layer. Okay. So there you go. This is fine. And press and hold Alt or Option and drag. This gives it a little more grungy effect. There you go. Okay. Let's look at the before and after. So this is before, this is after. You might want to increase the effect a little bit more. There you go. Okay. Before, after. Now it looks funky. So the next thing that we might want to do, as you can see, the print is continuing to the edge of the paper, which seldom happens. Usually what happens, the edges get torn off and the prints fade off from the edge. So we need to erase off the edges, but simply erasing won't work in this case. You might want to erase it in a way that it looks old and original. And one of the ways of doing it is selecting the already dark areas and erasing this layer, erasing parts of this layer from only those dark areas. Now, how do we select just the dark areas? Simple. Make sure you just turn on this background layer, nothing else, just this background layer and everything off. To do that, press and hold Alt or Option and click on this eye. And once you do that, what happens is every layer is turned off and this layer is turned on. It's a kind of solo mode. So to get all the layers back turned on, press and hold Alt again and click on this again. Everything is turned on again. So remember this trick. Press and hold Alt and click on this eye to make any layer solo. So now let's move on to channels and let's just inspect each and every channel, red, green and blue. So you need to select a channel which is the darkest, okay? Once you select the channel which is the darkest, click on it. Controller command, press and hold controller command and click on it. Now this makes a selection based on the luminosity. This means the brighter areas are selected and darker areas are not selected. And hence, we also might want to make sure that the darkest areas are selected. And for the darkest areas to be selected, let's select more of brighter areas. To select more of brighter areas and to double the selection, all you have to do, remember this, press and hold controller command and along with it, press shift. You see, the icon changes into a plus sign and once you click on it, the selection doubled and it selects more of brighter areas. Similarly, if you want to deduct the selection, if you want to decrease the selection, press and hold control and along with it, press alt or option. But we wanted to increase it. This is a selection of the bright areas and we want to keep the bright areas. And to keep the bright areas, if you create a mask, you don't have to inverse the selection, keep this in mind. So let's turn on the RGB and let's come back to layers. Now press and hold alt or option and click on this eye again to turn on every other layer. Now select this image layer. Okay, make sure it is selected and then click on this mask button. Watch what happens. The corners, the dark areas go away. Let's look at the mask. Press and hold Alt and click on the mask. As you can see, the dark areas are the areas which are not selected. Click it back on and as you can see this has faded, but along with it some of the bright areas has also faded a bit because it's not completely white. So to make them visible again, make sure you select the brush tool and make sure white is selected. To toggle between the background and the foreground color and to select white, press X. You see the color interchanges. Now simply start painting on the areas that you would like to recover. There you go. Isn't that interesting? Alright, you might want to decrease the flow just a little bit and there you go. And there are some areas that you would like to remove. Press X again to get black and this area I would love to remove because this is looking strange here. Alright, so there you go. Okay. Now this looks pretty nice. So without the layer mask, with the layer mask, this looks more realistic. Now there's another way of doing this more realistically, but that uses a plugin which is paid. And if you have that plugin, better than good and better than most. But if you don't have that plugin, use this free method. And guys, I didn't pay for the plugin. Somebody gifted it to me. Alright, so let's delete this layer and let's add a new layer. And once you create a new layer, press and hold Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E. What this does is that it merges every other layer and brings this to a new layer. Also, one of the other ways of doing this is that you can directly press Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E and this will create a new layer with all the layers merged in. Okay, next thing that you would like to do is to use that plugin. Go to Filter, Painter, Particle Shop. So the plugin has opened and this plugin gives you a variety of brushes, as you can see, Fabric, Fantasy, Flame, and these brushes are very random and fun to use. So what we would like to do, we would like to paint the edges with a black brush and use that as a mask. Alright, so make sure you select the black color and select the brush and paint with a brush which is kind of random. So this is fuzzy brush. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger and it's same as Photoshop. To make the brush bigger or smaller, press and hold Alt and drag it to the right to make it bigger, drag it to the left to make it smaller and start painting. As you can see how random this brush is. So let's start painting over the edges just a little bit. There you go. Look at how random the brush is. Okay. Now you want to make the brush a little bit bigger. Okay, there's one more brush called paper something, M. Okay, so this is more random. Sometimes this is too much to use, but it gives a pretty nice effect. There you go. Okay, this is fine. Now we would like to erase the brush from some few areas. So a little bit from here, a little bit from here. Now let's save it. So once you click save, then make sure you check save only brush strokes. Okay, and then click OK. This will allow you to save just the brush strokes, not the image that goes along with it. So that will allow you to create a mask later. Click OK and just wait. So as you can see in this layer, we have the brush strokes and this kind of looks ugly. Now what you need to do, you need to select the areas which has the brush strokes. To do that, press and hold Ctrl and click on this layer. This selects the areas with the brush strokes. Turn off this layer and select this monument, this image layer, and click on that mask again. Now this does just the opposite of what we want, so we would select the mask and press Ctrl I. So as you can see how beautifully the areas that we didn't want have been removed. Now you can increase the size of the mask. In this case, we would love to do that. To do that, make sure you select the mask. And in this case, we just want to tweak the size of the mask, not the image. To do that, make sure you click on this icon. Okay, this will allow you to edit things separately, edit the mask separately, transform the mask separately than the image. If this was clicked, this was on, what would happen is if you increase the size of the mask, the size of the image will also increase accordingly. So let's click on it. This will make these two separate, and make sure you select the mask, Ctrl T, and let's make the mask a little bigger and move it a little bit to the right. There you go. Isn't this looking so much more realistic? Let's look at the texture. You don't have to have the plugin, but then again, if you have it, better than good and better than most. Next thing that we would like in this image is a little bit of inkiness. Think of it like this. Think of printing this on an actual paper. Would you have so much more details in the shadows? No, you won't, right? So it will be a kind of flat. To do that, we would add a levels adjustment layer. But before that, I see a mistake here. I see a little bit of glitch here. Just look, have a look at the glitch. Look, a sudden starting point of the image. Why? Because the layer mask is a little bit shorter and we just shifted the layer mask just a little bit. To do that, to move it back, to stretch it, select the layer mask and press Ctrl T. And let's just stretch a little bit to the left, and there you go. Now it's looking right. Now to add that inkiness effect, add a levels adjustment layer. So just above this layer, we want the levels adjustment layer. To do that, click on this icon, gray, white, circle kind of icon, and click on levels. Now make sure that this layer has this kind of arrows. This does make sure that the levels adjustment layer is just being applied to this image layer. If the arrow is not being shown, press and hold Alt Option and click on it. You know what to do, right? Because since hue saturation already had that clipping mask on, this also by default has that on, and it just applies on that particular layer. Now in the levels adjustment layer, what you have to do, drag the slider from the left until it becomes a little dark. Now it's becoming an overall dark. Yes, we are removing the details from the darkness, we are removing the details from the shadows, but we want to make the shadows a little bit lighter, but we don't want to recover the details. So drag the slider from the left. There you go. Now it looks fine. Have a look. There you go. Let's look at the before and after, before applying levels, after applying levels. Now it's looking much more realistic. Let's take a closer look. So before the levels, after the levels. Look how flat this has become. You can make it a little darker if you want to. Before, after. A lighter, just a little bit. Now, there you go. Now, if you want to change the color of this drawing or an illustration or whatever it is, if it's a print, if it's a drawing. Now, if you want to change the color of this illustration, print or drawing, what you would like to do is you would like to add a new solid color adjustment layer just above the hue saturation layer and change the color to whatever color you want it to replace with. Okay, so suppose you want to paint with blue ink. Click OK. Now the next thing that you would like to do is change the blend mode to color. Now, this color is affecting the whole image. You don't want that, right? You want the color to just affect the buildings. To do that, again, right click on it, go to blending options, and the same procedure we have to do. Drag the slider from the right. We know we need to drag the slider from the right, but of what layer? The underlying layer, right? Not the current layer, because the current layer is just a flat solid color. So, underlying layer, there you go. And click on it, drag it to make it a little smoother. There you go. Now it's blue. You can change the color to any color you want. Dark blue, green, red, whatever your choice is. I don't want color personally, so let's just delete it. But it's your lookout, guys. It's totally Photoshop, it's totally subjective. I want you guys to use your own methods. Before we move on to the second sector where we actually talk about how to use your own methods, let's just add a little more grunginess to this, a little more texture. So to do that, we would want to create a new layer with all the layers merged. So remember we did this in this tutorial just a while back. How we did this? We pressed Ctrl, Alt, Shift and E. If you're using a Mac, it's Command, Alt, Shift and E. But this does not create a new layer. Why? Because a layer is selected which is turned off. Therefore, I already said before too that it's always a good practice to create a new layer and then press Ctrl, Alt, Shift and E. Now this creates a merged layer of all the things which are visible right now. If you turn off this layer and then you press Ctrl, Alt, Shift and E, this won't be visible in that. So make sure everything is turned on and then create this, or whatever you want to be turned on, and then press Ctrl, Alt, Shift and E. Alright, now we would go to filter and use this at the very end after you have applied everything, because once you create a merged layer, you won't be able to go back and edit those things. To edit those things, you would have to delete the merged layer and then do it again and then create a merged layer again and apply that effect. So make sure you do it at the end. So now let's go to filter, camera raw filter. Let's increase the clarity just a little bit to make it a little more grungy. And maybe the vibration just a little bit, vibrance a little bit, not the vibration. Click OK, and there you go. We have our image ready. If you are satisfied with this, awesome. If you're not, you need to tweak these settings. So that wraps up the first section of the video, and if this is what you wanted and this is just what you wanted, sayonara, I'll see you guys in my next one. But if you're serious guys, you might want to stay. Okay, we'll talk about the game plan and the strategy to approach any of your ideas in Photoshop and how to think it. Alright, so let's delete this merged layer for now. Okay, because I'm going to explain the strategy of how I approach this. And if you want the strategy in each one of my future videos, do let me know down in the comments below. It actually makes the video a little bit longer, but that's okay. Alright, so the first thing that I did is to think of it like a real paper. How would you paint on a real paper? And a real paper is always a paper at the bottom. And then above it, we have the paints. So start with that basic idea. Think of it in terms of reality. Okay? Think it through. Now talking about printer or paint, in olden days, we paint with dark colors, especially on white papers or bright paper. We don't need to paint with bright colors. Therefore, I changed the layer to multiply to just reveal the darker areas. Now, suppose you have a dark textured background. If it's a dark texture background, you usually paint with a bright color. You usually print with a bright color. That time, you might want to keep the blend mode to screen, because screen is just the opposite of multiply. And to try different blend modes, you know what to do, right? Select the move tool and then press Shift plus to toggle between different blend modes. Alright, one of my popular ways of browsing through blend mode is to, no matter what tool you're in, just click on it once, okay, click on it twice, and then if you're using a mouse, use the scroll bar, use the scrolling wheel to switch and toggle between different blend modes. Pretty cool, isn't it? Now, you can try different blend modes to see which one works with your background. Also, with blend modes, you might want to use something very powerful which I always use, and that's called blend if. Okay, and I explained to you the concept of which slider does what? So when you go to blend if, in this case, I wanted the dark areas to stay and the white areas to go away. Now, the white areas that I wanted to go away was from the layer of the image, not from the layer which is beneath. So I moved the slider of this layer, not the underlying layer, this layer from the right to remove the areas that are already bright so that I painted with just dark colors. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? If not, just skip to the third section where we talk about 3D. Now I clicked OK, and the next thing that I did was added levels and hue saturation. Now what was the point adding hue saturation? You see, this retains the original color of the building, and I know the original color is a little bit matching to the old paper, but in most cases it won't. At that time you might want to add hue saturation. Also, I thought of olden days. Olden days we didn't have color printers, so keep that in mind. Keeping that in mind, I added a blue hue saturation adjustment layer, and as you can see, I clicked on colorize. This makes your image monochromatic, and old printers were monochromatic, so keep that in mind. And then I added levels. I explained why I did that. And then the background copy again, to add a little more grunginess, to darken the areas that are already dark. And then added this as a mask. If you don't have that plugin, don't worry. You can always select the brush and blur out the corners or whatever areas you want to blur out. So the whole strategy is this. Think it through and think about how you would achieve that in real life. To apply the paints, you want to remove the bright areas. And if you just know the concepts on how to remove the bright areas, awesome, put that into work. And that's what I'm trying to teach through these funny things. Alright, if I had put a title about how to use blend ifs and remove the bright areas, nobody would see it. The whole objective of this tutorial is to teach you those little things, those fundamental concepts, and not to do this funky stuff, so that you learn with fun. So this brings us to the end of second section and to the beginning of the third section, and as I promised, we are going to do 3D. Now why 3D in this flat image? Now let me tell you why. We can make this more dramatic and realistic using 3D. How? What are we going to do? We are going to add a light, and wait for this, we are going to add bumps as in real life texture to this image and make the texture respond to the light that we add. It's going to be a lot of fun. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to create a merged layer. Okay, so let's create a merged layer, create a new layer, and let's merge it. Next thing, before we add the 3D effect, let's increase the clarity as we did in that. And this time you just have to go to filter, camera raw filter. Don't have to mess with the sliders because we already increased the clarity. Now let's add 3D. To add 3D, go to 3D and new mesh from layer, postcard. This makes this flat surface a 3D object. Now, once you do that, you will have a properties panel. You will also have a 3Ds panel, and if you don't have, as I don't have in this case, you would go to Windows and click on 3D. So this makes the 3D panel more visible. Now the first thing that we need to do, we need to remove the current light. To remove the current light, click on this light icon. See, the things are very simple. It's just very semiotic. Alright, so click on this light icon and let's just turn off the current light. So IBL, just check it out. This means, IBL means image-based light. We want to turn it off and we want to add our own light. To add our own light, click on this light icon at the bottom and we want to create a spotlight. Now this creates a spotlight at this corner or whatever corner you are creating the spotlight in, and it's not making this image visible. So let's zoom out just a little bit and rotate the spotlight just a little bit. Now this is the rotate tool, and you can rotate with it, and this is the move tool. So first of all, we would like the spotlight to be applied from the right top corner. So make sure you select the move tool. This is the move tool and not this move tool. This one. This is the move tool for the 3D thing, and move the spotlight to the top right. Let's just minimize the 3D panel. Okay. Now the spotlight is at the back of the image or maybe just at the side of the image. So the spotlight is not falling on the image. Now we want to bring the spotlight closer to you, closer to the viewer. To do that, select this icon, this tool. So this tool is called the slide the 3D object. If you want to know what each tool does, just hover over it and they will tell you. Okay, click on that and make it a little, as you can see, this is becoming more and more visible. Now you might want to use the rotate tool. This is the rotate tool to control where the light falls. There you go. Okay, now this is looking much more nice. To increase the intensity of the light, increase this color. There you go. Now this is looking a little strange. We need to render it to look awesome. Let's just rotate it a little more towards, there you go. Just move it to the corner. Let's just bring it a little further. And what you can do to make the light more softer, you can decrease the hotspot. This makes the light a more softer. And you can increase this cone to make it more wider. Okay, there you go. Now let's increase the intensity just a little bit. Okay, now still we have added the dramatic light, but we want the bumps in the image, we want the textures in the image to respond to this. To do that, we need to save a texture. Okay, listen to this carefully. We need to save a texture for the 3D tools to analyze and generate those bumps. So for a moment, let's just move to the background layer. Okay, and create a duplicate of this. So make sure the background layer is checked, click on this grid kind of icon and duplicate layer. Make sure you change the document to new, name the document whatever, displacement. Okay, and now you just have to save it as a PSD file. So go to File, Save As, and let's save it somewhere in the desktop. I know my desktop is a little bit of unclean, so let's save it as displacement. Save. Okay, now maximize compatibility. Okay, fine. Let's come back to this one. Select the 3D layer back. And this time, what you have to do, just pop up the 3D panel. There you go. And click on this icon. Okay, this is the surface icon. This is the surface icon. Click on this. Now, as you click on the surface icon, there's a slider called bump. Now, you want the 3D tools to generate the bump for you. So click on this folder kind of icon and select load texture. Okay, and then we would select our displacement thing that we created, displacement, open, and let it generate the bump. Now, this has generated the bump. And as you can see, the texture has been generated. Increase the bump if you want. There you go. Now this is responding, not too much. Awesome. Now let's zoom out just a little bit. Okay, we might want to increase the intensity of the light. So let's come back to the light and let's rotate it just a little bit. There you go. And intensity. There you go. And once you do that, once you're finished with it, click on render. Now rendering does take a little bit of time. This is the render button, this render things. This is also the render button. Let's just pop it out and click on render. I'll click on render and rendering does take a lot of time. So I'll just fast forward this. Okay, so let me click on the render. There you go. As you can see, brick by brick, it starts processing the image and it makes it so much more beautiful. So we'll just fast forward this and let's go. But wait, stop. As it renders, I'm beginning to see that the edges are becoming very dark, darker than I ever wanted. So I deliberately did this mistake so that I could show you how to correct this. That's a lie. Okay, so let's stop the rendering. To do that, press the escape button. This stops the rendering. Now, we want to make the light a little more wider so that we can see the corners more clearly, and the corners are not that dark. To make the light brighter, you can do two things. You can increase the cone, and it does make things more wider. Okay, also what you can do, you can take the light a little bit further. There you go. And move it just a little bit so that it covers most of the areas. Let's make it a little more wider. Increase the cone, it makes the light wider. Okay, now let's render this. Let's zoom in and now let's try rendering this. Increase the intensity just a bit. Okay, and is it bright enough? I think now it is. Okay, now let's render this. Are you ready, guys? I'll render this and put it on fast forward in 3, 2, 1. There you go. Now look for the edges. Now the edges are fine. So let's fast forward this.
Into the internet that we must reach. Into the internet that we must reach.
So as you can see, guys, rendering this will take another 1 hour 46 minutes and 25 or 31 seconds. So let's just pause the rendering and let me show you the results. So pause the rendering, I'll stop the rendering, press the escape button, and it stops the rendering. And I just wanted to show you how much depth the results have. The rendering has been stopped, and let's just have a look. So if I zoom in, as you can see how beautifully these textures have been shown. Look, just have a look at these textures. It's so realistic. So you might want to use this, and to save this, the same thing, go to File, Save As, and save this. So that's pretty much it for this video. I apologize if this video was too long for you, but I wanted to explain to you things in depth. Alright, so and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give us a like, and also don't forget to subscribe. If you have not subscribed yet, do subscribe, and also not just subscribe, click on that bell button so that you don't miss anything. I'll see you guys in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.